Hi Maria, very welcome to Capricorn TV. Delighted to be in Avebury today, in your local town. You've also wrote a book, Avebury, Sun, Moon and Earth, which is how we connected. We're going to talk a little bit about that, but before we get into that, tell us a little bit about you, Maria, your bio, who you are, what you like to write about and what you like to research.
Hi, well thanks for having me on the show, James. My real passion is about Mother Earth, Gaia, and her energetic system, which manifests in things like earth energies and ley lines, and her sacred waters that are born deep within the earth, and the electromagnetic patterns that they emit, which I think our ancient ancestors were aware of and harnessed. So my real passion is talking about the earth. I also run the Avebury School of Esoteric Studies, which is affiliated to the Association of British Correspondence Colleges, where I offer certificate courses in dowsing, past life regression, tarot and other esoteric subjects. And I was introduced to dowsing as a very young child by my late father. So dowsing is in my blood, and I live near Avebury, so the stones are in my blood as well, so to speak.
Wow. Yeah, that's what I loved about your book, Avebury, Sun, Moon and Earth, is that although it's dealing with an alternative subject matter or alternative concepts, you've also bringing an intelligent scientific discussion to the table too, and it's weird that you get both of those, Maria. So tell us about some of the earth energies that we're talking about, and how you use the electromagnetic detecting, and kind of give us that philosophy, what's going on there.
Yeah, sure. Avebury, as some of your listeners and viewers may be aware, contains the largest stone circle in the world. It is vast. The whole complex, which is a megalithic temple, spans some 3 miles of the ceremonial landscape. Now, our ancient ancestors would look for particular earth energy patterns, not just ley lines or ley systems. And these patterns tend to manifest in spirals or circles, for instance. Now, place a stone into that earth energy pattern and something truly remarkable happens. The stone begins to absorb the energy and almost like bring it up from the earth, and it starts to transmit it across the ceremonial landscape, from stone to stone, from site to site. So some of these energies, we could say, are electromagnetic, and dowsers such as myself, and especially my late father who investigated these, we've always said this is a reality. And there's 7 energy bands in any one large megalith, which I've always equated to our chakra system, for instance. So I come from an archaeological background as well. I've studied archaeology with Wessex archaeologist Bob Clark with the University of Bath. So I kind of know about dating systems, and I'm a mystic as well, so I'm left and right brain. So when archaeologists were saying, you can't prove anything, Maria, about what you've discovered, I thought, well, I'm going to give it a go. So I got Rodney Hale, who'd worked with another author called Paul Devereux. I expect you've probably heard of Paul Devereux.
Yeah.
Absolutely, quite a famous chap. And Rodney was his kind of electronic consultant for the Dragon Project. So I asked Rodney Hale to join myself and Busty Taylor to join me at Avebury and see if we could detect these signals. I would first douse them, and we would mark them on the stone. Then he got a certain very sensitive electromagnetic testing equipment, and he heard the frequencies and he recorded the frequencies. By hearing them, I mean he plotted their hertz frequency on the kind of graph, and intriguingly they came out about 18 hertz. Now you hear on average at 20 hertz, and I think our ancient ancestors could actually hear the signals being emitted by the stones. So I think their perception of an ancient site like Avebury or Stonehenge was totally different to how you and I see and hear the sites today.
Wow, fascinating, Maria. You know, you said the key word there, that temple, and we slap these names of Stone Circle and Passage Tomb, or Long Barrows, and all these fancy terms that we have coined, but it takes away from what these sites actually are, that they are temples. And there's many things going on, from acoustics, astronomy, and as you say, earth energies. And earth energy is something that I'm not overly familiar with, but I'm aware of it. So can anybody sense these earth energies? Can people pick them up themselves? Or, I mean, what I'm thinking is, if the ancients were building these, that they didn't have the equipment to detect it, and that they must have been able to physically attune themselves to sensing these environments, that they must have measured it with their human body.
Yes, I mean, there are many different ideas and theories abound as how our ancient ancestors recognise these so-called earth energies and ley systems and ley lines. But when we measured them by placing copper probes deep into the ground to see if we could get a signal from an earth current, from whence we doused it, so to speak, we found that, again, it's very intriguing that the earth energy current, and imagine a current, say, on average at Avebury is about 6 feet across in places, that across that 6 feet of its width, it mirrors your brain signals. So you have, very relaxed alpha brain signals around about 7 hertz to the more active and beta signals. Well, earth energies reflect that. Wow. So I think that when you feel kind of relaxed and your brain comes into the alpha mode, they sense this in the landscape. So they didn't need to be dowsers, although in a cave in Africa, the American dowser Sig Longren noted that dowsing was recorded in cave paintings. Wow. So it's obviously a very ancient science anyhow.
Sure. I think the acoustics inside a lot of the megalithic chamber cairns and tombs, there's theta frequencies as well, 7 hertz. We'll talk maybe a bit Malta later on in the interview. I want to touch on the dowsing, Maria, because this is a big part of your life, and your father as well. I want to give credence to Dennis as well, and you've had a really interesting upbringing. Now, this year, your father figure was like a really interesting guy, to give you this education in the home, as I say, this dowsing, which is a skill and an art, and it's an education for a multitude of things. So tell us a little bit about your dowsing history with your dad, perhaps, and then what you use this tool for.
Yes, well, I got brought up with dowsing. I got brought up with dowsing because it's a very simple thing to be able to do. It really, really is. You can detect things and you can find things. So the principle of dowsing is basically detect something, program your rod to find something, and it will. From, water pipes, for building to, much more subtle energies, like earth energies. But you could dowse for gold, for oil. Uri Geller was a very famous dowser for oil, for instance. So you can use dowsing for a multitude of things. And it is really, like I said earlier, it's very, very simple to do. You just have to relax, hold a little bit of metal in your hand, and then you can command your rod to show you a direction, to show you a location, and then you can track something. You can follow something through the landscape. You could follow cabling underground, water pipes, or again, more subtle frequencies that the earth admits. So my introduction to dowsing was really to have fun with it. It was also to then kind of understand how dowsing can be used to get to the ancient histories of ancient sites. So, for example, I was taught from a very young age how to what's called remnants dowse. And that's, imagine that a stone was once pushed into the ground, pushed into the earth energy pattern, and it's then got toppled or broken or disturbed in some way. It leaves behind this etheric, ghostly outline, and you can start to detect the size and the breadth of stones that have been missing for millennia.
Could you do that then, particularly for Avebury, where it has so many missing stones, right?
Yes, it is. You see, when a stone has been removed, it literally is still there in the etherics. And that's what we can dowse. So that's really handy for what's called archaeological dowsing. And my family also inherited the unpublished surveys and manuscripts of another master dowser called Guy Underwood. Wow. And Guy Underwood was amazing because he went to the Stonehenge environs in the 1940s, just after the Second World War. And you see, at that time, England could not feed itself. So a lot of the ancient sites went under the plough to make way for agriculture and, to grow food, basically. So Guy recorded the whole of the Stonehenge environs and he mapped them out, and I've got those maps and they're completely different to what we see today.
Oh, beautiful. I think I remember reading in the book there's energy bands as well, that there is actually different types of bands and it's actually quite distinct in all the stones.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, if we see a standing stone, and I've got a visual if you'd like a visual to have a look at.
Do, yeah.
Yep. So I just get that.
This would help.
When you plug a standing stone into an earth energy pattern, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 energy bands above the ground. And because the stone is rooted into the ground, you have 2 energy bands below ground, equating to 7, which mirrors the number of chakras that we have. Band number 2 here is very interesting because it sends a magnetic signal to that stone, to that stone, to that stone, to that stone, if we imagine that all of these stones are a stone circle. So it creates a web of electromagnetic activity within the stone circle itself. Now, this is what Rodney Hale recorded. He recorded the electromagnetic frequency emitted by these bands, and we can clearly see here that there are huge signals being emitted by the standing stones themselves. So, we know that there's these strong signals. Now, band number 4 above the ground here emits a signal that travels to the next stone circle. Basically, this band here links stone circle to stone circle to stone circle across the ceremonial landscape. But the most intriguing band is band number 3, because when we tested out how people interacted with this energy band, they would say one of two things. We feel an energy that pushes us away from the stone, or we feel an energy that pushes us into the stone, as my writing colleague Busty Taylor can attest to. So we decided to measure this because he was saying I'm getting heavier, or I would say I'm getting lighter when I put my hands against this energy band. And incredibly so, Busty Taylor gained 2 stones of weight within a very small fraction of time. Now, what if you could reverse that process, for instance? What if you could manipulate this band number 3 here and make it lighter? So maybe that is a part of solving the mystery of how the stones will actually move. The stones can move themselves because they can manipulate weight. And we're investigating that further. But what do these bands do to me if I just lean against them? What Rodney Hale then went on to do was to have a look at how the energies influence my physical body. And he was very clever. He made 2,000 meters of very sensitive copper coiling into one big sort of copper hoop. He asked me to stand in it, and this is just me simply stood in the hoop here. Then he asked me to literally put my hands against the stone, and look how the electromagnetic signal shoots up into my body. It spikes. Now, we measured and measured and measured that day after day after day. And this was after just 60 seconds of me touching the stones. 4 days later, the energy of Avebury stays with my physical body and increases my electromagnetic energy field. So something very magical is happening when we interact with these ancient sites. I expect you've heard of Harry Oldfield, haven't you?
Yes.
Harry Oldfield. Well, I went with one of his colleagues to Wayland's Smithy Longbarrow, and we decided to have a look at the standing stones that were rooted into the earth energy patterns and the ones that weren't. And I predicted that the energy field would be recorded on the main stones rooted into earth energy, and the ones that were not, which you can see clearly here, do not give off the colour. And they're coming up in the order of the chakra colour sequence, from the reds to the violets. So we can't hear the frequencies of the standing stones, and we can't see the energy. But just imagine now that you're stood against that standing stone. You're being bathed in light.
You're tuning your chakras in a way.
Exactly, and I feel this is what these one of the purposes of Avebury and other sites is their fundamental principle. They can balance our energy fields, our physical bodies, our emotional bodies, so that we function more holistically. Because people come to Avebury, and the place really does change people. It will just change some people's lives. So something is interacting continually when people come to these ancient sites and world wonders.
Keeping on the earth energies, I think the last time we spoke on the radio show, we were talking about the Curses Monument and the radiation that's embedded in this trench. Maybe just talk about this in terms of its physical description.
Would you like to see what the curses look like?
I do, yeah. You're prepared. Yeah, it's incredibly fascinating that you're talking about the radiation that comes out of the earth, or stones, and it's contained.
William Stukeley visited the Stonehenge environs in 1723, and what he recorded was this massive monument here that spans nearly 2 miles right in front of Stonehenge, and this predates Stonehenge if we use orthodox dating systems. And if we use that orthodox dating system, this is about probably about 5,500 years old, if not more. Now, it was built out of chalk block. This isn't just a pile of earth. What this is an earthen bank going all the way around, creating an enclosure 2 miles long. About 10 feet high, possibly 6 feet at its most minimum, but built out of chalk brick. So imagine just like you see a brick house, that's how this was built round. Now, in the near centre, which we always call the esoteric centre of an ancient monument, roughly about the time of the spring equinox, you have a massive outpouring of gamma radiation that pours out of the Cursus monument. So what were our ancient ancestors doing? What was happening? Were they prehistoric physicists that could somehow alchemically transmute gamma radiation? Because gamma radiation is actually quite destructive to your physical body. So I feel that what is very intriguing about this monument is it has no entrance. It didn't have a causeway like most henges do. So this was evidently not meant for mankind. It was meant for something else.
Is there acoustics measured inside? Has anybody measured the acoustics inside the trench?
Sadly, this got ploughed out after the Second World War, so it's just a mere bump in the landscape. But I went there 2 to 3 weeks ago, and I took some electromagnetic frequency readings, and you have these massive spikes. Wow. But Stonehenge, the Cursus monument, is surrounded by up to 10 military camps and military establishments. So that could have been a military signal. We have to look into that further.
Sure. The reason I asked is the main complex that has a similar, it's on a smaller scale, but there's I think you can stand at one end of this long trench embanked wall, and that you can basically hear what's being said at the other end because the acoustic field is contained within the ringed wall. Very, very similar historic monument. Yeah, the thing is, I mean, you're talking an ancient science, Maria, here. We're talking ancient physics, because the more you look at this, is they have everything that our universities have. They have the acoustics, they have the philosophy, they're exploring their consciousness inside and outside these monuments, their acoustics as well. Do you think these guys are aware of everything they were doing? Do you think that these guys were like we are as physicists now? Do you think they understood it in its complexity? Do you think there was a lot of it maybe not understood but explored? Maybe they were just continually exploring all this stuff, but maybe I think some of the specific evidence speaks that they did know it.
I think they knew it, and I think they knew what they were doing, and I think this was a science that had been handed down. So I don't think it was a new science in the Neolithic. I think this was handed down by the Mesolithic. I actually think the monuments are much, much older than what they are. I don't necessarily think they're millions of years old, but I think they are an awful lot older, because what archaeologists do is if they find 2 samples of carbon, they will take not the oldest sample as a date, they take the youngest. So at Stonehenge, for example, under one of the blue stones called the Q&R holes, they found a piece of grain, and it dated to 7,700 BC. But because it was next to a grain that was much younger, 2,500 BC, they chose the latter date because it fits into their model. Apparently everyone was busy in 2,500 BC building pyramids, and they kind of used that timeline as that was when things happened. So Stonehenge could be 10,000 years old.
Do you think there could have been a wave of building in 10,000 BC and then another wave of building in 2,500 BC?
Yeah. I mean, one thing about Stonehenge, even if you use orthodox dating system, and it's the same for Avebury, is that you have different phases. So Stonehenge had phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and so on and so forth, spanning some 1,000 or so years. So these sites were completely being renewed, updated, you know, for purposes that we only glimpse and think about now, that seem very elusive and mysterious to us.
Just like Carol Keelan Ireland, there's a 1,000-year building program, phase A, B and C they call it, same thing again. They built over very long epochs. I think Göbekli Tepe is a good point to might make that in 10,000 BC or around that era. There was megalithic building going on in Turkey, so...
I think Stonehenge, and it will be proved pretty soon, that is a Mesolithic site, and that is contemporary to that site in Turkey.
It's kind of like there's a stranglehold on this 3000 BC, 2500 BC era, and we can't get out of it. It's like we've been told everything's 3000 BC, and don't look beyond this spectacle because there's nothing there, and don't even suggest anything. And I think what I like about Göbekli Tepe is it's broke the mold, and we needed that because it's now archaeologically acceptable, and it's actually, like you say, these places are temples and worship, and it kind of pushes out this idea that farming came first, and then as a result of overproducing agriculture and farming, this notion that we then developed religious ideas. You know, it's poppycock, like, you know. And I think these ancient sites being correctly dated is important for that reason, because it restructures our own view of humanity, philosophy, and everything.
And there were Mesolithic finds at Stonehenge. I mean, recently they found a whole town, a Mesolithic town.
Wow.
Now, we're told that in England that the Mesolithic were hunter-gatherers. No, this was a permanent settlement used over 65 generations. In fact, when they went to the deposit layer of the Mesolithic lithics, as they're called, that's bits of stone, they were so sharp, razor sharp, that they cut some of the archaeologists' hands. So we know that was a huge town in the Mesolithic period. And more than that, in the 1960s, there were two archaeologists called the Vatchers. They were kind of moneyed and they could dig where they liked. Wow. And they decided to dig around the Stonehenge environs, and they weren't particularly good archaeologists. And they found these post holes. They got carbon from that. It was dated to 8000 BC. Now, I have suggested to archaeologists and other people that was temple space. That was an actual very vast timber structure. But because the Vatchers weren't very good at their archaeology, it was never excavated again. So hopefully that will be re-excavated. So yeah, I think these temple spaces are Mesolithic.
Why Stonehenge, its location? But is it an earth energy location point, a nodal point? Is it a geodetic point for navigation? What's so special about Stonehenge?
In my understanding, Stonehenge is a very special location for astronomical reasons and for earth energy reasons. For a start, Stonehenge is on sloping ground. Yeah. They could have chosen a much flatter area, but they didn't. So they had to compensate how each stone went in each side. Really? They had to do that at Stonehenge because it's on sloping ground.
That's indicative of something really particular.
Oh yes, because if they'd gone a little bit further down, the ground becomes flat. Have a look at that when you're at Stonehenge next time that you're there. So they chose sloping ground, which was an engineering nightmare, really. They could have, like I said, built somewhere much, much easier, but they chose not to. Now, Guy Underwood mapped that area from the 40s to the 60s. He spent over 200 visits going to Stonehenge. And what he found was Stonehenge is like this huge nexus vortex, which emerges from which energy line after energy line after energy line. It is basically kind of like pouring out energy continually. That is the magic of Stonehenge.
I think the Ring of Rowan in Scotland has a ring ditchybelly that they dug into solid bedrock, and for the same reason they could have moved the stone circle to the left, to the right, up and down, but they wanted that specific location, and when they put their henge ditch into it, they dug solid bedrock, which seemed like an engineering nightmare, like you say again. It screams to me that these guys wanted this real estate in this location, and that was what they wanted. Like we wanted beachfront properties today, they wanted certain zones, and earth energy is the only thing that I find addresses that situation, because it doesn't always work for astronomy. I mean, you can have a ring of latitude and get the same astronomy, so I'm hoping the earth energy is there.
Yeah, there's an interesting point that you make, because all of the earth energies that outpour from Stonehenge flow to the Cursors Monument, or they flow to the barrows, and they flow to the barrows that didn't contain burials. So that's another intriguing fact, because some of the round barrows that are sited around Avebury and Stonehenge did contain burials, but some of them certainly did not. And they were built in a particular manner that reflects Wilhelm Reich's orgone generator.
Do you think maybe the Earth energies were higher then, and we're only measuring a very diminished output now? At these Earth energies could have been literally sensed on the back of your neck or your hair standing or whatever, you know? I kind of think that.
That's really interesting that you said that, James, because I've been going to Stonehenge since, the late 80s and the 90s. So if there's an energy change there, I kind of think, whoa, and I did notice building up from 2010 onwards, heading towards 2012, that the energies at Stonehenge were getting stronger and stronger. And very interestingly, round about 2010, 2011, that was when English Heritage brought out their massive rule, you cannot touch the stones even on private access. And I think that's because Stonehenge was coming into its power. Now, round about the time of the equinoxes, well, like I said, where you have that massive outpouring coming from the ground of the gamma radiation, well, guess what? You can't get anywhere near Stonehenge at that time. Oh. It's closed off. You can't even get private access at that time. So it's either a big coincidence that that's happening, or that temple space that can change our lives, our consciousness, our reality. Some people would say we're denied the access to that.
Well, I know, let's talk about some of the composition of the stones as well. I know Stonehenge has special qualities there, but all across the megalithic empire they chose a lot of crystallized content in the stones. And some examples in Ireland, hopefully we get to see you in Ireland next year for another tour, but they have literally sheets of quartz stuck to, they expose the granite on one side and leave the quartz vein exposed as a sheet to be illuminated at sun and starlight. And I think that, electromagnetic energy does become more magnetically shifted when it hits crystal, and because electromagnetic waves are part electric, part magnetic, and I do think, that's an important point in lunar alignments and solar alignments. These are going to charge these monuments literally certainly with the lunar ones as well.
And granite's an important stone as well because it does something quite intriguing. That is a geological fact, actually. So let's say we've got our granite standing stone. We've put it, let's just say for argument's sake, into an earth energy pattern anyway. Let's give it a bit of kind of power. But what happens when the sun and the moon cross the horizon, which is at dawn and sunset, sunrise or moonrise and set? It creates, if the site's near a fault line, and most ancient sites are sited within 1 or 2 miles of a fault line. That was discovered by one of John Michel's co-authors, Paul McCartney, not of the Beatles fame, but of the same name. He discovered that fact. So when you've got your piece of granite put into the earth, sunrise, moonrise, you have what's called the shear force effect. Now, just like you have the seas, the tides come in and out, don't they? They ebb and they flow. Well, that's what happens within the earth. You get the fault line will produce what's called a shear force, an ebb, a flow of energy that sends through the granite or the quartz a kind of energy which you can feel as tingles on the stones. So the sun and the moon literally create this shear force effect on the ground.
The more I talk megaliths with everybody, every single show I do or every interview I do, it's just my intellect of these guys. I cannot put them as anything other than super scientists. I have to elevate them to this status because the evidence points that these guys knew a lot. They knew technology, maybe not like we have with our stripy toothpaste and our fancy telescopes, and we point stuff up in the sky and hey, look, we see a galaxy. And these guys did it with earth and mud and stones, and they did it against the odds. They did it with a very bad toolkit, if you want to call it that. But it was a natural toolkit. I want to talk to you about this geospirals that you call it. You douse these spirals, because we have a lot of spiral artwork, especially in Newgrange in Ireland, and I just want to talk about this spiral. You can actually measure this.
Yeah, spiral energy is called a geospiral. In the old kind of dowsing school, they're often called blind springs. Now, the blind spring is a particular type of water born within the earth. It's independent of rainfall, and it emits this spiral pattern, an intense magnetic field. Because again, geological fact, underground water produces its own magnetic field that interacts with the Earth's magnetic field. So you've got changes where you have vast amounts of underground water, especially the underground water that's born within Gaia. I mean, I'm a second generation water diviner. I've been saying this for ages, and I was absolutely thrilled last year when Dr. Gerald Pollack came out with his very vast studies into water and said that water under high pressure changes its structure. And it isn't H2O, it's H3O2.
Wow.
It changes its structure. Now, underground water that's born within, like Gaia's womb, if you will, as it comes up out of the ground, that is under intense high pressure. And where that water breaks through to the surface, that's your sacred spring, or where that water is poured, that's your holy well. It has a negative charge and it is high in its alkaline content, which is good for your body, basically. So that's the sort of water, the reason why the ancients said it was medicinal, because it is. It's a different structure and it's a different compound. And to live above that spiral energy pattern, it emits a really harmonic field that equates to what's called the Schumann resonance, the background frequency of Mother Earth, yeah? To live above aquifer water, which is, let's say, for instance, when the rain falls, it fills up the underground water, streams and the aquifers. That's called yang water. That emits a particular pattern of like 3 lines going like this. If the stream's like that, that's what a dowser would detect. And they would know that's carcinogenic to live above. Safe to drink, you certainly wouldn't live above that type of underground water. So there was 2 different types of water. One emits a harmonic field, the other emits an inharmonic, totally dangerous field with long-term exposure, will be carcinogenic. So water beneath the earth emits the spiral patterns, a spiral field that is completely alchemic. It can transmute anything into a kind of higher frequency. That's why our ancient ancestors chose the geospiral pattern as their esoteric centre of their monument, be that Newgrange, for example.
Which is at the edge of the Boyne River, and a lot of these megalithic places are near either a river or some sort of an aqueduct or water feature.
Same at Avebury. I mean, you can't see it at this time of the year because the Winterbourne is dry, and that's why it's called the Winterbourne, because the waters are born anew in winter in this area. Wow. Because the water table lifts up. But you do cross one avenue. You would have to cross a river to get there. And same with Stanton Drew, associated with the river. Stonehenge associated with the River Avon.
Wow. I've got to talk ley lines with you, Maria, because this is another thing you can douse as well. And I kind of want you to explain for us what a ley line is. We've discussed this before, but it gets confusing. There's dragon lines, there's ley lines, sometimes they're topographical lines, sometimes they're astronomically aligned, or sometimes they're actually like an earth energy line.
That's right. There are many different categories of ley lines, and a ley line itself, the name was coined by Alfred Watkins in the 1920s. He wrote a seminal book called The Old Straight Track, and he said you have the minimum of 5 ancient sites, and you can include churches in that, springs, manor houses, because the Masons were fully aware of energy lines. Have the minimum of those 5 sites on there, you have a ley line. But Alfred Watkins was not the first to document ley lines, or that is widely spoon-fed to us these days. In fact, the first documentation of ley lines came from a very notorious magician called Dr. John Dee. He was the astrologer and magician to Queen Elizabeth I. He documented about ley lines and their earth energy currents. So you can get ley systems as well. I mean, there's a famous ley system in Geneva, on the French-Swiss border, and that has 24 lines radiating from it, and that's featured in my new book. And it's interesting, James.
Equally spaced, or are they equally spaced?
Near enough. They have a 15-degree separation on average, so it is quite. I'll show you it in a moment. But my point is, where those lines meet is Geneva, where our world decisions are taken. Wow. CERN particle accelerator is located on those fast-flowing energy systems. So even in the modern day mindset, we're still applying ancient technology, because according to the ancient Chinese and all geomancers, a ley line, a straight line, conducts chi, energy of the universe, if you will, really fast. They're fast-flowing. So when you get 24 fast-flowing lines, no wonder you've got some CERN particle accelerator beneath it.
Yeah. I did a physics with astronomy degree, and it was an academic degree, but all the other fellow physicists, they all got so excited about CERN, and I used to laugh, and I said, it's the most ridiculous idea I've ever seen. They get paid £50,000 a year to not discover anything. They just smash things in and just look at the results, and it's not an encouraging field. Honestly, I think there's maybe even in the conspiratorial
That's
sense.
the lay system, James.
Wow. I think in a conspiratorial sense that CERN is probably there for other reasons.
And here we can see the 24 lines that radiate out from Geneva. So that's called a lay system. It's quite a complex lay system. And it has some fantastic numerology in it as well. So that's one type of ley line. Another type of ley line was discovered rediscovered actually, by an antiquarian called Edward Duke. Edward Duke lived in the Stonehenge environs. In fact, there's a very famous chap lives in his house now, and that's Sting. So long before Sting lived in this house, it was the Reverend Edward Duke. He was a Mason. You find that all the kind of ancient antiquarians, William Stukeley, John Aubrey, Edward Duke, they were all Masons, so they were privy to occult libraries. And from an occult library, he came out with this incredible ley line system that links Stonehenge to Avebury. And I'd like to show you that. Again, this is featured in the book. This is what Edward Duke discovered. He discovered that there were 7 sites, all in equal alignment on the line. You've got Stonehenge here. You've got Silbury Hill representing Earth here. You've got a stone circle that was north of Avebury called Winterbourne Bassett here. And you've got Mars represented by a huge, massive superhenge at Marden. Den is an old word for settlement. Marden means the settlement of Mars. But more than that, Edward Duke said these represented planets. Avebury, the sun and the moon.
Sure.
Stonehenge, Saturn. Castley Camp, which is on the line, Jupiter. So it's interesting to note that there's 30 standing stones going around the outside of Stonehenge, for instance, and it takes Saturn 30 years to do one orbit around the zodiacal belt, as viewed from Earth. So there is something in this system. Well, I decided, what if our ancient ancestors were aware of Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto? Yet to be discovered when Edward Duke was probably privy to this occult manuscript. And what we discovered was phenomenal. Stay on that same line and add the modern day planets to it, like Uranus, Neptune and Pluto. And yes, they're on the line and they're represented by sacred sites.
Wow.
Now, not only that, I got Rodney Hale, who I mentioned earlier, who's also calculated the Cygnus alignment for Andy Collins.
Sure.
So he's got some really good astrological software, basically. And I said, Rodney, when we look at this ley line with all of these ancient sites laid out in this ceremonial landscape, did it reflect an alignment in the heavens at any particular time? And after much searching, and it took him quite a while actually, he said, yes, it is. There's perfect matches to 2750 BC and 3100 BC. Now, they're archaeologically correct dates of when these sites were active. Doesn't mean they were built in that time, but certainly when they were being used, they reflected in the heaven what was going on in the heavens. They were laid out on that ley line, and they're planetary alignments. It's heaven on earth.
Wow. I know you've just come back from a trip in Ireland, and it's funny, we have a Mason's Hall right beside Beltany Stone Circle.
Really?
And we also have a Mason's Hall in Lough Crew. We also have a Mason's Hall built by Mr. Netterville in, I think it was the 17th century, right beside those megalithic mounds, which most people don't realise either.
Right, I didn't realise that actually,
yeah,
James.
It seems to be that the Masons have knowledge of maybe megalithic places, or they were at least very much attracted to it. I don't know if they had all the knowledge, but I certainly think they had some sort of an occult background know-how on what these monuments were.
Absolutely.
Power places, perhaps. Maybe power places.
Oh, absolutely. And Guy Underwood, that master dowser I mentioned earlier, He was a barrister. He was, moved in kind of, gentry circles, if you will. And what he noticed was that the buildings of the manor houses that were designed by the Masons were all on earth energy patterns that can give a better kind of quality of life because they emitted these really good frequencies, if you will. They're really good to live above. And Guy Underwood noticed that time and time again. So manor houses, okay, they had a better diet, you could argue. They had cleaner water, they had their own wells and things. But living above earth energy patterns like that can extend your life categorically.
Maria, just take a moment to hold up a copy of your book for the audience. Dowsing Ancient Insights into Their Creation. Wow, what a fascinating book. That's out at the moment?
That's going to be out in literally about 2 to 3 weeks. Wow. So this is my sample copy. It covers all different types of ley lines, earth energies, how to locate them, how to integrate them to create your own sacred space today, just like our ancient ancestors created sacred space, modern day Feng Shui, if you will. And it looks at particular ancient sites like Stonehenge and Newgrange, actually, and how these earth energy patterns imbued the buildings with special qualities, which can change our consciousness and also switch us on to the ancient past, because underground water, as lots of homeopaths would tell us, has memory. So I like to think that this particular type of underground water, the H3O2, is like the Earth's Akashic records. And you can tap into that memory bank, because lots of people I take around these ancient sites come out with particular stories at particular stones that are very similar to other people's experiences. So it's not as if they're tapping into their own kind of past life. It's like they're tapping into a much wider library, an Akashic library.
Wow, fascinating. Maria, I just come back from Russia. I had the pleasure of Mr. Klaus Donner. I held the fossilized bones of giants in my hands, a heel bone and the two neck bones. And I know there's evidence of skulls and bones perhaps found at Stonehenge that are highly anomalous as well. Do you think there was a race of giants in the past? And I'll throw that way out there.
Absolutely. In fact, Edward Duke, that I just mentioned, who had rediscovered that ley line system, his father, who was also called Edward Duke, actually, he found in a barrow close to the Stonehenge environs a very giant skull. Now, this skull, it was so unusual, he decided to put it in display next to a church, and it became a superstitious thing. You touch this very gigantic skull and it would give you good luck or something. I tried to track that skull down, and I was led a merry dance from one museum to another museum to another museum. But Edward Duke recorded that, and William Stukeley recorded it after him. So there was something very unusual with skeletons around Stonehenge. And recently, under the auspicious digs of Michael Parker Pearson of Stonehenge fame, he found skulls that were like elongated. He says they've been binded to produce that shape, but it could be that they were natural. They're going to be bringing a paper out about that in the near future.
I've had Brian Forster on the show many times, and it's something I think is incredible research. You seem to have this head binding all around the planet, everywhere. Whether it's artificial or natural, there's elongated skulls of either one shape or the other.
And they were in Stonehenge, and there's 6 of them found.
Wow. And of course Malta, major megalithic place, home to this elongated skulls as well. I got them there.
Yeah. I think, it's not just one place. I think the elongated skulls were common. They were a common race of people. Some people will say Nephilim, extraterrestrial. I mean, where you go with that, I don't know. I don't research it. But I do think these were probably more common than what we think. And probably great examples are in the British Museum vault, the Smithsonian Institute vault, etc., etc.
Yeah, the secret vaults where it disappears and you never see.
Absolutely.
I really do believe it's something like the Indiana Jones movies with the big giant crates of hidden artifacts that are just put outside because they're anomalous. And it's like it's a human trait. If it doesn't fit, you put it on the shelf and you only look for the things that do fit. And this sort of stuff just gets filtered out. I think it's more of a conspiratorial thing on top of it too, but I think it is a natural condition just to filter things out that you don't understand. And you've danced all around the world, Maria. Tell me about some of the other sites outside British Isles.
Right. Well, I suppose again, you're always led by your passion and where you feel that you should be. And because I doused in America as a child, I really feel very drawn to the sites there. So I'm fascinated by Serpent Mound, and Serpent Mound is a really strong energy center and energy effigy. Now, in Ohio, you had lots of different types of monuments. In fact, you have the world's largest henge there, Newark. So you have Newark there, you have Fort Ancient there. And what I noticed as well was some of the lost American sites, which is quite intriguing. We were talking about conspiracies just a minute ago, and I'll show you a little feature from the new book. George Bergstrom was the designer of the Pentagon, and he lived in Wisconsin. Now, Wisconsin was home to 5 of the most ancient and sacred Native American sites that were in the shape of the Pentagon. And he lived literally next door to one. Now, the ancient Americans that used those monuments at the time they were being recorded by an antiquarian said, we didn't build them. They were built by the kings of kings. So they were definitely claiming that they didn't build them. But they used them for quite grisly rites. You know, there were sacrifices made there. The blood spilt represented the head of America. It would make you a warrior nation. It would give you strength. And it was kind of about war, ownership, and that type of thing, which really is what the modern day Pentagon is all about now. So I feel that what was going on in America during the 1800s was a systematic destruction of their ancient sites, which were then rebirthed into modern day sites such as the Pentagon. So if I show you that, you will see the similarity, and you will see where George Bergstrom took his inspiration from the Pentagon from. So we see here, we've got a henge, a ditch and a bank with the 5 pentagon shape, and which is reflected in the modern day Pentagon. So the designer saw this and he built that. Wow. So I think that a lot of the ancient Native American sites are very subtly encoded into their cities and into their street plans. I mean, Washington, D.C. is well documented, isn't it? Sure. So, yes, so I think, for me, down in different places, whether that's in somewhere like Malta, which has more underground energy fields, doesn't it? Like a bit like the Druids over here had their fogus, where you enter the ground. All designed for different purposes, but with the world in mind, so that these people were communicating globally, I think. I don't think they were separate. So I think when the pyramids were being constructed, and you had sites like Stonehenge, everything was linked together, so there is no separation. And America played a role within the energy system, which was systematically destroyed and redeveloped in a different guise, so they have a kind of world domination now.
You know, a lot of the mounds too, I think I spoke by telephone or Skype briefly about this before, but the same numerology of these henges in America and the British Isles. Belfast henge, 666 feet in diameter, Dove henge, 555 feet in diameter, Thornborough henges in England, 555 and 666 again. 1080 is another common numerology of the henges.
Yeah, 1080,
and all the hounds and mounds in Ohio, although built at a different time frame if you accept that dating system, and they're showing the 1080, the 555 and the 666 all the time again.
That's interesting. You mentioned the 1080 because that 24 ley line system, if you use numerology on it, that comes to 1080, which John Michel, author and geomancer, master geomancer probably of all time, he said was a feminine number, and 666 was its solar counterpart, meaning the kind of tyrant energy. So yeah, I agree. And they also were built quite similar.
It's also the radius of the moon in miles, 1080.
Yeah, I know.
Another feminine entity.
Yeah, and John Michel points out as well with the bluestone circle at Stonehenge, that is precisely 79 feet and 20 inches. You start multiplying that by 100, you get 7,920, which is the precise diameter of the Earth, according to John Michel's calculations. And if you draw a circle around the two trilithons, you get the diameter of the moon, which equates to then an astrological age, doesn't it? And you get all of these kind of, synchronicities down the line, so to speak.
Well, inches, feet and miles all head back to the Amorites and the Babylonians just for 2750 BC, which is where we get this unit of the inch and the feet all from. And I really do believe in this unit of measurement probably being copied at megalithic sites. I'm really open to that. I'm going to take a little break there and read. Hi Maria, very welcome back to Capricorn TV. Before I start, Maria, I just wanted to mention the cruise that you're going on with the Ozark Management Publishing crew. Vitaly has asked me to mention, I'd be glad to. It's Guy Needler's going to be there, he's been on the show before, Robert Bobal, another guest for Capricorn Radio and TV as well. Dolores and Julia Cannon, I want to talk about past life regression and of course yourself on the tour as well. And I just had Dolores was my last guest, by the way. Dolores Cannon had an interesting window into past life regression. My father has done hypnotism himself, although it was for cures for asthma, and I have some knowledge of hypnotism, just working knowledge. I've never tried it myself, but I'm a little bit knowledgeable in it. But tell us about your route into past life regression. Is this what you're going to do on the cruise, or is it just other stuff you're going to do on the cruise?
Well, I'm going to be focusing on kind of the earth energies, Templar, secrets of the Templars, and that type of thing as we kind of move around the different countries, because we'll be going to Malta, we'll be going to Jerusalem, we'll be going to Sicily, and we're going to Rome. So it's called the Holy Lands Cruise for obvious reasons. So I'm going to be focusing on kind of the lay energy there. Also, when I ever get asked to, speak at a conference or something, I always think, well, what's my higher purpose? And my higher purpose, I feel, for this cruise is to try to reconnect the people to the land and to the energy systems, which I think are fragmented in the Middle East. So we have spiritual work to do on that tour. Sure. And with Dolores, obviously, she's world famous for her insight into past life regression, and Julia Cannon is, again, some of the world's best regression therapists. I got into past life regression back in the early 90s, and I qualified in 94 with past life regression, and then I went on to teach it as well. And what really got me into past lives is because I've got no sense of direction. You ask anyone and I'll point the wrong way. Oh, that's left, when I'm pointing right. I've got no sense of direction. And back in 88, I decided to travel the ley and douse the Mary and Michael currents that entwine the St. Michael ley from Cornwall to Avebury. And when I reached Glastonbury with a friend, I just knew where Chalice Well was. I knew where the tour was, even though we were coming in from the Somerset end, so to speak, from the Cornwall end rather. And I found it. And then when I started to kind of interact with the energies of the world, I went naturally into like a past life where I was at Glastonbury. So that's what got me into it. And then I thought, wow, something's happened. I walked down Glastonbury High Street. I saw a billboard, sandwich board rather, saying past life regression. So I thought I'd give it a go, and got even more information from that. So from those experiences, I decided to qualify in hypnotherapy, NLP, I'm qualified in as well, and then decided to focus on past life regression for healing purposes as well, like you mentioned the asthma. I really feel when we can tap into our past or memory banks, I mean, it might be a collective unconsciousness we tap into, it might be a personal soul consciousness we tap into. I'm very open-minded about, what we can actually tap into and get information from. And past lives is a massive doorway. It's a portal into our soul understanding.
I just come back from Egypt, and I made it up to Abu Ghraib, which is a big, giant, strange crystal compass, and
crystal what? Sorry,
crystal compass. It's magnetically aligned. You're not even allowed to go there. We had to sneak into the site, but it's magnetically aligned to north, south, east, and west, and it's a 12-foot piece of crystal. It's incredibly interesting. If I could get a chance to go back, I would. But while I was there, the guy that I was with was a real estate agent, and he was just signed up for the tour, and he was telling me, that he remembered his past life in Egypt, and I never met anybody who really remembered their past life. I never had sat down and had a discussion with him. But this guy was so intense about what he was talking about. He was shocked, and he's searching for answers. It's like he's just woken up to some sort of truth about himself, Do you think there's a purpose for remembering past life? Do you think the individual remembers it for a reason because he needs to know about that past life? Do you think it's important, or is it curiosity, or...
I think it's important to some people, and I think what's happening now, in my experience of past life regression, is that a lot of people are getting information about how to help the earth, about how to live harmonically. So I think past life regression incorporates a lot of soul values, and with past life regression we can find our spiritual purpose. So it's not always about, one's past lives. Obviously that's an integral part. But if you could find out your spiritual purpose, who you are, what you're here for, that's very important, and that can open again another doorway to your life purpose. And for me, that's incorporated into past lives as well.
Marie, of course you do tours around the world as well. There's some really awesome sites, Ireland being one. You've just come back from Ireland.
I love Ireland, James.
Wow, thank you very much. I feel very proud and honoured. But tell us a little bit about the Ireland trip, and I want you to talk about the Malta trip as well. I think you had a Malta trip as well.
I've been to Malta, but I'll be going back to Malta with Dolores Cannon pretty soon. But Ireland, Ireland is close to your heart, James. It's close to my heart. One of the sites, and you probably have far more awareness of this site than me, the one that really kind of, I felt, expanded my consciousness and touched me in a way that was very like an awakening, like wake up to Ireland, Maria, was Carrickeel.
Wow, really?
Yeah, it was
my favourite place of all the sites.
Is it really? It turned out to be my favourite as well. And I remember climbing the kind of hillside, the mountain, and we went into the first chamber. Then there was a second crystal structure mound, and then the third one, which was the highest kind of point on the hillside. And you could go into it and then stand up. And I saw the two stones, the female and the male stone, that are identical to the two blue stones of the entrance to Stonehenge. Wow, and I just looked at that and thought, again...
Same mindset, same mind.
Exactly.
Wow.
Exactly.
It's a beautiful ambience in Carrickeel, and again, it's got the sun and the moon. I think it's Carnegie has the light box like Newgrange, and it brings the sun in every summer solstice, sunset. And every 19 years there's a lunar line that comes in too. But I don't know when the next lunar line is, but perhaps we'll get you for that one, Maria.
Definitely. I've done Callanish for the lunar alignment as well. Yeah, because Callanish, it's a Scottish site in the Outer Hebrides.
I've lived there, but I've only seen the money, but I've never been to the lunar. Incredibly rare event to get that.
Oh, absolutely, and I felt privileged to go there, and that was 2006. That's when the moon's at its most southerly position. And you have a beautiful mountain range by Callanish, and it's called Sleeping Beauty, because it's like the curvature of a beautiful woman lying down in the landscape, and the moon goes through all of her curves. And then it turns around, and the moment it sets, and Margaret Curtis, she's a world authority on Callanish, she said the moon is so big at that latitude that if somebody stood in the centre of Callanish with their arms outstretched, their two hands there would be going to either side of the moon, it would be the man in the moon. So I thought that's very poetic, and it sums up the artistry and the astronomical precision of our ancient ancestors.
It is an art to do that. You mean, let's say you can map out solar alignments, lunar and lunar maximums, minimums, but to do an artistic display of light like that, I think the Scottish, the recumbent stone circles do something similar. They catch the moon on the hailstones. This is art as a result of their science, and that's the way I like to look at it. These guys were super scientists displaying an artistic display at the end of their feats.
And I love that term, super scientists, because it really does sum up their knowledge and their understanding. Because, like you rightly said, the Aberdeenshire sites, they're very lunar orientated. But at the Cove Stones, just down the road from where we are now, at Avebury, they were also aligned to face the moon's botanic cycle, so every 18.61 years. One of the stones' long axis line literally points to that moonrise. And I videoed and recorded that with photography, which is in the book Avebury, Sun, Moon and Earth.
Wow, fascinating, Maria. Tell me about Malta. What do you think of Malta?
Malta, I think, is islands are special. Yeah, you live in Ireland, I live in the British Isles. Perhaps I'm a bit biased, but I really do think islands are special because it's about travelling somewhere. It's about a journey. So for me, Malta, Ireland, England, it's about a journey. And I think the kind of energy system of Malta, which was also written about by Jude Currivan in her excellent book, Hope, where she feels that Malta represents the kind of yin-yang balance. You know, it's balance personified. And where you go into the subterranean realms, if you like, of Malta, I think that kind of allows us to remember the past. We're talking about past lives with Dolores Cannon. I think Malta wakes us up to something within our kind of soul memory bank. And I think it's about balance. I think the energies there are particularly balanced. I think the architecture there is absolutely mind-blowing, but all ancient sites are. But I feel that these places reconnect us to the distant past. And let's not forget, places like Stonehenge, like Malta, like the pyramids, like our wonderful Caracciel, they're a physical link to our distant past. And by going to these places and journeying to these places, we kind of reconnect with our soul memory, and we remember that which was and what will be again.
You know, I was just in Caracciel last week, and the actual people in Sligo City didn't even know what Caracciel was. It's Ireland's best kept secret, even by the locals. It's like, you know, it's funny because some of these places are so remote, like Halling's too, and not a lot of people get to go there. Again, and a lot of people flock to the sites like Newgrange and Stonehenge and Avebury. Perhaps Malta, you know, although it gets a lot of people, I think the Maltese monuments, although they're not isolated, they are in terms of the archaeologists there, because they say that they're Maltese monuments. They're not like part of the megalithic civilization of Europe, you want to call it that. They kind of say hands off. They're more monuments, and they don't like anybody connecting them, although they have to. And they're kind of backed into a corner. Do you feel that?
Yes, I think it's difficult, I suppose, because you mentioned when you were talking about that compass in Egypt, which sounds fascinating. And I was also fascinated by the fact you said, and we weren't supposed to be there. Yeah, that was your next breath on that. And I thought, well, wow, that has to be important. And I think when a kind of country or people or culture says, no, we can't do that. It was, you know, this, it was that. That's when it has power. It's a power place. And obviously that place in Egypt, like Malta, they're power places. And they're there not for one culture, but for a global culture, for all of us to share.
You should say, it's on Capricorn TV, the Crystal Compass as well, in the Outlook for Chematology, but it's actually also sitting over an aqueduct as well, which is strange, like, in terms of Malta, did you go to see the Hypogeum?
Yes.
What do you think of the Hypogeum? I can talk about the Hypogeum all day long. I think it's the most strangest, bizarre, interesting, like not in an eerie sense, not in a scary sense. I just think it's really bizarre, you know.
Again, it's about consciousness, isn't it? I mean, we could go to Avebury, we could go to anywhere, and if an ancient site touches us, kind of metaphysically speaking, and awakens us to something, well, then walking around these monuments, especially in places like Malta, do just that. They kind of suddenly make you aware of something much, much bigger than yourself. And for me, lots of ancient sites do that. And Stonehenge, Malta, these places, when we go to them, they take us beyond our everyday lives. They take us somewhere into the cosmos, somewhere within, almost like at the same time, so that when we come out of these places, we come out changed. We are a different person to the person that we went in. So in that way, I think a lot of the ancient sites were used for initiation purposes, to really connect your consciousness to a higher source, if you will, call that God, call that what you will, and that we can travel in time in these places as well. So I think they were more than just a physical site. They have metaphysical properties. They can change us, introduce us to new concepts, and we can tap into universal knowledge, and we can tap into Gaia's knowledge at the same time.
You know, when I go to ancient sites, the engineer, although I go for engineering reasons, and I want to look at the science of these sites and the engineering of them and the logistics of it, but, you know, first thing that happens to me is I get touched, as you say, and I switch off my engineering mind, and I get all emotional. I feel a sense of loss. Sadness, because we have lost something very precious, Maria. You know, it's authors like yourself out there chiseling away at it, doing some research, and we're against the odds because we're looking at a fragment of what's left, and there's a lot of it's been tampered with. And I think there is a massive sense of loss out there that we have lost something very precious. Do you see things like that? Do you think it's a precious
Yes,
commodity?
yes, I do, and that's really touched me what you've just said, because I really agree. I mean, looking at Stonehenge alone, it's a ruinous site. What if that was put back together? What would that do? What would that do to the energy system? What would it do to Earth? What would it do to the people? Yeah. So if we had these sites and they're all in their kind of pristine condition, from a compass to a stone circle to underground chambers, then I feel that would be so incredible that we could then go back to that time period and learn something really, really unique about the super scientists, as you call them.
Super scientists, for sure. I mean, I look at everything they were doing, and they're mathematicians, architects, logistics of moving the stuff from all the places they grab their materials from. You know, the acoustics, the astronomy. There's so much in these places. They're like Stone Age universities or Neolithic or Mesolithic universities, whatever you want to categorize.
And they're multi-layered, aren't they? All sites are multi-layered, from their aquifers, whether that's yin or yang water, to their astronomical alignments. So they are multi-layered.
Tell us a little bit about the original landscape of Stonehenge, what it looked like. Kind of paint a picture for us, Maria.
Yeah, Stonehenge was sited on the Salisbury Plain. The Salisbury Plain was cleared. It's a grassland. Today it's surrounded by military camps, which I said earlier. And Stonehenge was not an isolated monument. I mean, that's what most people think. They look at Stonehenge and think that's the monument. No, as I explained earlier, it had the Cursus monument coursing in front of it. It was surrounded by two gigantic concentric circles of round barrows, not all of which contained burial. Nearby was Durrington Walls. It's a super henge. It was at one stage the town, or the city, if you will, that housed the people that built Stonehenge. You had vast timber monuments like Woodhenge, two timber circles inside of Durrington Walls, that's Superhenge. So you had a monumental landscape. And they're the monuments we can trace now. And I'm sure archaeologists are looking for, they found at least 9 other satellite stone circles around Stonehenge. And I predict, on Capricorn TV, they're probably going to find 12 or 13 stone circles. So again, we have to think about Stonehenge as being very, very vast. What does it look like today? It looks like grey stones huddled on the windswept Salisbury Plain, but that was not the Stonehenge of our ancestors. The Sarsen stones, which are the big, gigantic, lozenge-shaped grey stones, they were so highly polished that they were very silver in colour. And the blue stones from the Preseli Mountains, some 170 miles away, were again highly polished, dark blue, with flexes of feldspar, so they looked like the star-spangled midnight sky. Stonehenge was a colourful place. It was not a grey, huddled stones we see after 4,500 years of erosion, orthodox dating system.
What do you think about all these ancient sites? I think there was a documentary I watched, Maria, where they were able to prove that the Scottish people were migrating down due to something that was found in the bones or something. You could tell by the radiation that the water they were drinking from the
Isotopes.
Isotopes,
yeah.
So we know that they migrated from Scotland down to Stonehenge, which is quite a mean distance in that time.
Yeah.
Do you think these guys were maritime culture? They were navigating by both coastal regions? They obviously were coastal if they were in both Ireland and Britain. So,
yeah. The isotopes that they found at Durrington Walls, actually, the settlement of Stonehenge, was that they were transporting cattle, especially Aberdeen Angus. It's a good steak today for many people, and it was in the Neolithic time as well. So that they found they were being transported. So not only did they transport themselves, vast amounts of cattle. Transportation was not a problem to our ancient ancestors. They were fully aware of how to move across this landscape, whether that was on boat or whether that was using other technologies besides. So the isotopes around the skeletons that were found around the Stonehenge environs, for example, you have Egyptians in the Avebury, the Stonehenge landscape rather. You have people from the Baltics, and you have people from Geneva as well, all told by isotope oxygen levels in the teeth with the water that they drank within their first 5 years of being a child.
This is how advanced the science is now. We're getting to peer into the windows that we could never imagine. And, you know, it's high tech science, and it's coming up with major revelations.
And also, you know, going back to Malta, for example, in one of my past life regressions that I did, this one lady was saying that there's far more beneath Malta as in terms of an island, and there will be, you know, like other Europeans found in being buried beneath Malta, and that was a centre of like global cultural exchange, Malta.
No, I actually had a little heated discussion with the archaeologist at I think it was Skoda Temple. But I was saying, I questioned him about the red ochre paint that they have on the hypogene. There is no source of red ochre in the island. They're desperately looking for it to make these Maltese monuments. And I said, surely if you can't find the red ochre, well then they're not Maltese monuments. They came from somewhere else. And they absolutely hate the idea of this. You know, and
that's a very good point, actually. It's one of those really good practical points that create an anomaly.
You know, the thing is, and what saddens me is, Maria, that when you go to Portugal, they couldn't care less about half the monuments here. The Portuguese don't talk to the Spanish, they don't talk to the British, they don't talk to the Irish, and they go, yeah, you might, if you're lucky, get a map and say these places appear here, there, and there, and none of these governments. Cultural institutions all talk to each other to transmit their knowledge, to make these into a megalithic culture, a culture of Western Europe, because that's what they learn. They dominated Western Europe, and, you know, and it's great for us in the British Isles because we have so many left. But I mean, I feel saddened that certainly with Portugal, they're pretty much all gone, like, you know.
And same with Poland. You know, Poland had a very vast stone circle called Dry Stone Circles, and that had fantastic alignments to the summer solstice, the Star Capella. As Norman Lockyer points out, some Egyptian temples also aligned to the Star Capella. But intriguingly so, when the Third Reich under the leadership of Himmler invaded Poland, that was the first place they cordoned off, was the stone circles for their, you know, occult pilgrimages.
I'm glad you mentioned the Nazis, because the Nazis were in the dozen as well.
They created a whole school. Again, it was Himmler, and on Himmler's 43rd birthday, Hitler actually congratulated him and wished him luck with his Dowson School in Munich. And he also said in one paper, because they burnt a lot of their, you know, when they realised they were going to go down, actually, they burned and destroyed a lot of their research. But they said using Dowson, they found the X factor, which is, you know, a musical show today. But in all seriousness, they said they found something using Dowson, but what that is still remains elusive.
Do you think Leeds Callan of Coral Castle he tapped into some earth energy? Do you think he discovered an earth energy that he could manipulate?
Well, he was certainly a small chap that built a huge castle, you know, so I mean, he was on his own. He moved. In fact, some of those stones were heavier than the Greater Trilithon at Stonehenge, which is 25 tons. So he could move stone. How he moved that, again, is one of the mysteries of modern day Florida, I suppose you could say. But in experimental archaeology, there was an American archaeologist that looked into how the stone could have been moved there, and he came up with a device which was like a ball on a big round table, and you just pushed the table, and you could actually move a 10-ton megalith with ease.
There's some of those balls inside the hypogene in Malta. And I think a lot of the Maltese megaliths have these grooves where they put balls in it too. We're going to wrap it up with that, Maria. It's been a fascinating discussion. Just give us a copy of your book again one more time before we go.
Yeah, that's Divine and Ancient Sites, Insights into Their Creation, available at www.theaveburyexperience.co.uk.
And you can find all of it in your file there, and your tours and everything else you do, Maria.
Absolutely. Check me out online.
Wow. Thank you for your time today, Maria. It's been beautiful.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me, James.